Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to Adventures with Dice. I am Rob, and today we have a video where I am going to tell you my opinion on the top 5 authors that you should read to improve your fantasy/fantasy horror role-playing games. These are required reading for dungeon masters, game masters, in my opinion. And I know Runehammer did a video like this, and I agree with a couple of the choices he had. A couple of them I don't. But, you know, that's his opinion on the ones he thinks are the best. If you like these kind of videos that I'm putting out, check out my Patreon. The link is in the description. I put out early access videos on there. I put out exclusive content that you can download. I also have an Amazon wish list and everything if you want to help support the channel that way. But anyway, let's get past all that and get right into it, shall we? So, inspiration. That's key, right? Like that, as a game master, we are always, if we've been doing this for any amount of time, we are always looking for inspiration. And so many times you get inspired by so many different things. In this day and age, a lot of it is movies. For some people, it's anime, video games, TV shows. But at its core, I feel like there are certain authors whose written word you really need to read or read some of to get this. Some of this is Appendix N stuff, and some of it's just my personal opinion. But if you run fantasy role-playing games that are it doesn't really matter. High fantasy, low fantasy. Some of it's sword and sorcery. I run my fantasy a lot of times with a trickle of spookiness in there. And that is the topic of the month since we are in October and coming up on Halloween. I felt like it was appropriate to do this video. So my first suggestion for you would be pretty much any of the books by Fritz Leiber. I'm not sure how you say his last name, but Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, all right, the Lankhmar setting. These are really, really good books. Good stories, more so. And you can usually find them in collections like this with a whole bunch of them together. I really enjoyed them. And I think that he is hands down like a must-read. I mean, most of this predates any of the, as far as I know, it all predates D&D. And a lot of inspiration was drawn from this, especially from Lankhmar itself. So I would suggest checking out Fritz Leiber, and reading some of his works. The next on the list that I would suggest, I'm sure most of you have heard of, and that is Michael Moorcock and the Elric Saga. He has some other stuff too, but I've really only read the Elric stuff, and man, it's so good. It literally just dumps you right into the action. It's very pulpy in the way it's written, and again, you can buy these collections of the stories together. I think I picked most of these up at like a used bookstore quite some time ago, but they are really good stories, and when you start reading all of this and putting it together, you can see where a lot of the inspiration for fantasy gaming came from. So Elric and his Cursed Blade Stormbringer, and this list would not be complete without Robert E. Howard, the works of Conan. Solomon Kane is good too, but read some of the Conan stories. You can get these volumes like this. I think this has like 13, or the first 13 Conan stories in it. And these are just really, really good sword and sorcery books. His writing style, though he was friends with Lovecraft, is nothing like Lovecraft's writing styles. His is very, I mean, he is the godfather of sword and sorcery, hands down. So if you're interested in that kind of gaming and you're looking for some inspiration, read some of the Conan stuff by Robert E. Howard. I have not read the Conan stuff by other people, only Robert E. Howard. I'm not saying the other stuff isn't good, I just haven't read any of it. His is the only works that I've read. So I highly recommend that. Now we're getting into the spooky part of it, right? So we're getting away from just like everything else I've talked about so far has been either your low high fantasy, sword and sorcery, standard D&D type literature. But I would also highly recommend Lovecraft. If for nothing else, the mood that Lovecraft gives in his works. Now, I'm not going to lie, it can be a little hard to get through some of his stuff just because of the way he writes. And a lot of that has to do with people who don't read a lot, I think. If you read more, you're more well-versed in that kind of stuff, then you're probably not going to have an issue with it. But he does have a very particular style to the way he writes. And honestly, you either like it or you hate it. And most people like it. I mean, he's kind of well known. But, I mean, you can get stuff like this. It has a whole bunch of, like, its essential stories. I've got, like, the complete collections up there in hardback of most of this stuff. But I find these are easier to travel with, just grab and go type books. But it doesn't, like, he doesn't do a whole lot of fantasy, but a lot of his stories introduce that cosmic horror element, which you can transfer over to, take inspiration from, which is what this video is about, into your fantasy gaming. Or if you happen to be running Call of Cthulhu, there is no end to the Cthulhu style works. And my last one, my number 5 here, or number 1, depending on which way you went on the list, is also a little bit spooky, but this one is this book is the essential collection of Edgar Allan Poe, and it's stories and poems. But I find this kind of stuff to be very, very inspiring, whether it's set in a more modern day, not like modern day, but like, you know, in the late 1800s or whatever. There are just some great stories here that can really spark the imagination. Edgar Allan Poe was fantastic as a writer, so I highly recommend at least picking up a collection of his essentials work, even if you don't get, like I have the complete collection of his stuff too, but those big, huge, hardbound books are difficult to travel with, so I prefer these for just the casual reading copies. But it's got tons of great books in here, great stories in here. My favorite story, Mask of Red Death, is in here. This and Lovecraft together give a very... They don't really hit the sword and sorcery spot so much, but they give you that real macabre, spooky feeling, and you can transfer that over to fantasy gaming and use it if you're maybe you're doing some one-shot stuff for Halloween, or a storyline, or you're doing Ravenloft or something like that. There's a lot to pull from here, and that's kind of why I wanted to do this video, is just suggesting don't just look at movies, video games, and TV shows. Go back to some of the original literature that was written by historical, fantastic authors. We're not going to get into their views on things. That's neither here nor there. There's plenty of videos about that. But just as inspiration, I find those to be my top 5 authors that I pull inspiration from. And I don't know, do you have other authors that you pull inspiration from? Maybe more modern authors? If so, list them in the comments, or if you're making videos, make a video about it. That'd be cool too. I love watching stuff like this. Sometimes I get turned on to an author that I didn't know about, you know. So I hope you enjoyed the video. There's not really a direction to it other than me saying, hey, these guys wrote some really great stuff and you should read it if you're a game master. But that's kind of what I'm doing here, just letting you know that this is some great stuff that you should check out if you're a game master, because it will really get the imagination flowing and help you come up with ideas for games or themes for games really quick. Again, if you have your own list, drop it in the comments below. I'd love to read that kind of stuff. And until next time, my friends, good gaming and good luck.